said, hey, how do you feel about coming to Area 4 Detective Division? I said, well, I'm cool over here. He said, well, I need your help. And that's how I got moved. So every position I got moved to, I was comfortable where I was, but it was for the betterment of the department, and it made me better. And all of those movements helped prepare me for becoming superintendent.
Yeah. Hi, welcome back to Detective Story. I'm Mike Hammond. Thanks again for joining in. We really appreciate it. We got another fantastic show with a guest that I am shocked and really happy to have here. Of course, my pal, brother-in-law, co-host, Chris Kafcas. But we are joined by former Superintendent Eddie Johnson. Boss, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me.
Our pleasure, really. Before we get down to it, though, there's some things that I want to discuss as we do here. Since we were last recorded, the Chicago Police Department's had a pretty rough go of it. On April 2nd, former or retired police officer Rick Coyle, who had moved to Kentucky after he retired, taking a job with the Sheriff's Department down there in Crittenden County, Kentucky. He's actually working as a school resource officer. But as often happens in these kind of more rural places, the sheriffs will have their ancillary officers. I'm speaking a little out of school here because I don't know their exact protocol there, but in general, a lot of them will also have reserve deputies, and they'll have them one day a month or so go out and take a shift, ride on a shift, keep them sharp, give their regular, they're usually not highly staffed, bolster staffing, things like that. Rick was a SWAT guy here in Chicago. I worked with him in special operations in 11th District on the west side. He was a real man, real policeman, SWAT guy, trained, good guy, compassionate guy, funny guy. He's a guy you wanted at your back if shit went down. So he's working down there in this as school resource officer, but he's out riding one night. I'm not going to get exact details, but basically they go to serve some type of summons, kind of a high risk thing. He goes in because he's a trained guy with other trained people. The guy starts shooting at them, and unfortunately Rick took one. They killed the bad guy, so he's out of the picture. But Rick fought, but on April 30th, he succumbed to his injuries. I'm going to, in fact, after we're done recording here, I'm going to head down to Kentucky for his memorial on Friday. We're going to miss him terribly, but he's an honorable man. I want to recognize his sacrifice. So that's that. And then on top of that, a couple Saturdays ago, 25th of April, I believe, we had two officers shot. John Bartholomew and Nelson Crespo were transporting a prisoner to a Swedish hospital, and in some fashion, the offender was able to get a hold of a gun and shot both Officer Bartholomew and Officer Crespo. Officer Bartholomew, unfortunately, was killed on scene. Officer Crespo, as we're sitting here now, still fighting for his life. So our thoughts and prayers go out to Officer Bartholomew's family and Officer Crespo and his family, and we're hoping for him and that he recovers. That's really all I got to say about it. I do have to say there is no reason that any reasonable person could justify this criminal still being on the street at the time that he killed Officer Bartholomew and shot him. The guy is a multi-time convicted violent felon. We have to do better as a society. It shouldn't have happened. That's all I've got with that, gentlemen. I mean, I know.
You know, it's I tell you, Mike, one of the things when Rahm Emanuel approached me about becoming superintendent for CPD one of the things that gave me hesitation was I an officer getting killed under my watch. And that's a tough thing because people don't know this. I have 4 officers that were killed under my, administration. And from the time that person is killed, the superintendent typically spends every day 3 or 4 hours a day with those families, man. And that's difficult. It's hard. It's hard to sit there and try to comfort them because what do you really say? Yeah. But it's kind of cathartic at the same time because for me, I learned a lot about the officers' personalities and who they actually were. Yeah. But it's still difficult. And anytime, you have police involved murders like that, man, the entire department mourns and they grieve. But this is the other piece of it. Every officer thinks to themselves, that could have been me, and their families look at it that way. Yeah. So those things are just difficult, but we do know, when we sign up for the job, that's part of it. So we accept that responsibility. But nevertheless, that doesn't make it any easier to deal with. Yeah. So my heart goes out to them, and I pray for all those families.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's really, that perspective is something that I've always thought about, wondered about, because, I had to make hundreds of family notifications, over the years, homicide detective, and that it's terrible to knock on that door, right? And I can't imagine as soon as we knocked on the door with the ties on, they fell apart. They knew, right? Mm-hmm. And I can't imagine as superintendent knocking on the door, what's coming.
Yeah, right? It is, and the looks of the loved one's eyes, the look when they look at you, you can tell when you lock eyes with them. You can tell that they're hoping that you can tell them some good news. It never failed. Yeah, you can tell that that's what they're hoping to hear from you. Yeah. That just isn't the reality of it. So it's
kind of a reality shift there, right? As they're in the situation, there's a part of the human brain that's saying, this can't possibly be happening. Yep. This cannot possibly be happening. Yeah. And you almost want to wish yourself into a different reality, but the reality is standing right in front of you. Yeah. It's rough.
It is. It's a difficult thing. But like I said, we all know that it's part of the job, but that doesn't make it any easier.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And, one of the things, I don't know how you feel about this. For me, like, it a little bit, this is trite, but like ripping the Band-Aid off, I didn't try and sugarcoat anything. I just went right to it and said, look, I'm sorry I'm here with the worst news. I don't want to be, everybody's got a different approach, but I just found like they know.
Well, I think you're right, Mike. That's something that you really can't beat around the bush with because you're not going to make it any easier. Right, so you just have to get right to it, man. And I can remember coming down the hospital corridors, with wives, and they're just looking at you, but you can't pretend, right. You just have to tell them, I'm so sorry, because it hurts. Yeah, it does. I remember in the Area 4 Detective Division, the first time I had to make a death notification, that woman she didn't quite know what was coming, but I just had to tell her, man, and she fell into my arms, and that's just not a good feeling, man, when you have to give someone some news like that. But yet I agree, you do have to get straight to it. You do.
Yeah, you do, because, it was as a young detective, there's a dramatic shift in going from patrol or, then narcotics for me to being a homicide detective and having that responsibility because – I can tell you, or somebody can tell you, and we had all these, at the time you were in Area 4 as my sergeant, we had really great people there up and down the line, detectives, bosses, and people can tell you, all right, well, this is the way to do it, this, but that's especially one of those things, like getting your ass kicked on the stand by a good defense attorney. Right. Until it happens to you, you're not figuring it out.
You have to experience it.
And it was same with those notifications, And when I said did it hundreds of times, I'm not exaggerating, 16 years, and you just got to expect anything's going to happen. I've had them want to fight with me and want to hug me and want to pray with me and want to everything you can imagine.
Yeah, it's all kinds of emotions that come with something like that, especially when you have a death that's so sudden. Nobody expected it. Nobody saw it coming, and then you have to notify the family, man. That's just, and like you said, sometimes they want to fight with you. Sometimes they hug you. It's just a gauntlet of emotions that come through when you have to do something like that.
Yeah, agreed. And I every step up the ladder, it's more magnified, I'm sure, until you get to the point where you're at.
Yeah.
It can be more magnified than that. You know what I mean? We'll move on from there, but want to acknowledge that I do have some business I always have to take care of. Our partner at Gun Barrel Coffee, please check them out. Sal Dazzo, great guy, veteran, big supporter of veterans and first responders. $1 of every sale goes to first responder veterans charities. It's great coffee too. You're the coffee guy, Chris. And I'm not a big coffee guy. My daughter loves it. Go to gunbarrelcoffee.com. He's got a wide range. He roasted in-house, and use the code Detective10 and you get 10% off. So we appreciate that support. This is kind of a mutual partnership between us. So we really appreciate that. And also our Patreon page. Now you can join for free. And there's other tiers where you get more access to some of the stuff we do. But you can sign up for free, and there's a lot of free stuff there. So please visit that. So that's business. Let's get to it. So excited, man. Thank you for coming in. It means a great deal to me. We just had Melissa Staples in, who is your chief of detectives.
Yeah.
Melissa well. She's a riot. She's been a friend a long time.
She is. Good lady.
Yeah, she is. And it was a fun episode. And she was really the catalyst, I think, to get you to come in. So I appreciate that. But let's go through it first. So you got a job in 1988?
1988, yeah. I came on the job in May of 88. And I tell you this, people often ask me what made me become a police officer. And to be quite honest, when I was about 16 years old, my mom had a really good friend, and her daughter was like a year or so older than me. And she went to a house party one Friday night and decided to go home before her girlfriends wanted to leave because they went all together. Anyway, she left by herself walking down 115th around Halsted Street. And some guys pulled her into a car, raped her, and killed her. And, man, I just saw the grief that caused,
Yeah.
Man, it was just devastating to watch my mom and, her friend go through that. And so I just wanted to help in some kind of way. And a buddy of mine told me, hey, they're giving a police test. And, bam, I took that test, and here we are.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, and I love asking this question on the back end of someone's career, but when you entered the police academy, in your wildest dreams, did you ever think that you would make superintendent?
No. That was never even something that I thought about. I tell you this, though, Chris. For me, I just wanted to do the best I could with wherever I was, but no, making rank really didn't cross my mind until, maybe after about 4 or 5 years on the job, because I was having fun as a patrolman. I was having a blast, and I thought I was making a difference. But then as you go along, I wanted to aspire to be a sergeant. And then once I made sergeant, I came on in 88, I made sergeant in 98. Once I made sergeant, I knew I was a stone's throw away from lieutenant, and the sergeant's test, actually, I was a field training officer at the time. So I was an FTO for 7 years. And the thing about me was everything that the department put out, I read. And the reason I read it like that was because I didn't want my recruits knowing more than I did. So I read everything. And unbeknownst to me, because I did that, I was actually studying for the promotional exam.
Yeah, right.
So I think maybe about 4,000 or 5,000 people took that particular sergeant's exam, and I was number 5 on that list. And I'm extremely proud of that. And that just goes to show you that if you put the effort in, you can do it. So after that, of course, then I wanted to actually be a lieutenant. Yeah. And so I put in the work for that. And the first part of that lieutenant's test, I think I was number 3. It was in 2 parts. And then the second part, I fell off to 123. And I know what I did wrong on that particular test. But I made lieutenant as a result. And then I knew once you make lieutenant, anything's possible, of course. Right. You know, so after about a year, I went to the 15th district, Austin, on the west side. I was there about a year or so before I was promoted to commander of the 6th district. So I went right back to the district that I trained in, and I was a patrolman in for about 10 years.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, for people outside of Chicago Police Department, the way it works is, you know, detective's kind of a separate kind of entity, and it's a promoted position, tested position, but the administrative end is, you know, you're a patrolman, first rank sergeant, second rank lieutenant, then captain. They got away from captains when I was a young policeman, then they got back to them, and then commander and on up the line. But the talk among Chicago policemen is always like, patrolman's a tough job, sergeant's really a tough job, lieutenant's a much better job.
Oh, yeah.
Once you're a sergeant, being a lieutenant, like, you make lieutenant, you're pretty well in good shape then, right? Pension is a little better, and also you're not. It's just a little better job.
Yeah.
So I've known throughout my career, like, most sergeants, they won't get a lieutenant, they're happy there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if they go higher, it's great.
Right.
But making lieutenant is the big deal, right?
Yeah, because let's face it, Mike, patrolmen, those blue shirts, that's the backbone of the Chicago Police Department. Any police department.
It certainly is.
But in terms of supervisors, sergeants that's the backbone of the supervisory rank. If you have good sergeants, like when I was a watch commander in 15, I had a really great group of sergeants. When I was a commander 6, wonderful group of sergeants, and that makes your life a lot easier.
Yeah,
you know. But like to your point though, once you make lieutenant, it kind of flattens out and it's not as stressful. I'll put it like that.
Right.
One of the things we talked about a little bit with Melissa, right, was that how the perspective changes as you kind of go up the ranks, and you begin to see. She was talking about how you just, as you go up, you increasingly see the bigger picture. Responsibilities change. I'm sure the stress changes, right?
It does.
More different responsibilities, more pressure. How did you find that transition from patrolman to sergeant to lieutenant, and then on up?
Okay, great question. So, from patrolman to sergeant, in my opinion, that's the toughest leap you'll make, because when you make sergeant, you have to recognize you're not everybody's buddy anymore. It's your job to supervise them. You know, you can't be the life of the party anymore, you know, because you have a supervisory responsibility, and you have to take that with a lot of weight. You know, you really do, because a lot of those young patrolmen look to the sergeants to kind of guide them, because they're just learning, you know. So, and your perspective starts to change. Melissa was absolutely right. You know, the things that I thought were what they were as a patrolman, as I started moving up the ranks, I started to find out. As a patrolman, we really didn't have a clue how this stuff actually went. And I'll tell you something else. One of the things that prepared me for superintendent was being a sergeant in Area 4 Detective Division. You know, first in RBT, robbery, burglary, and then switching over to homicide. Those situations really started to prepare me for being a superintendent in terms of the supervisory roles. District commander, I tell you, I don't think I would have been as successful as superintendent had I not been a commander in a district that had its challenges in terms of violent crime, because what that did was put me in a position to where I had to start interacting with the community when they were not happy with the Chicago Police Department. Yeah, that man, and you know, when you're in a violent district like that, there's always something.
So
right.
That would have been. You would have been a district commander post Caps, right?
No, so Caps had just started to come back when I was a district commander in the 6th district, and my Cap sergeant Dwayne Betts, as a matter of fact, who retired as a deputy chief, but he was really great at connecting the police department with the community. He just had a knack for that type of thing.
Yeah.
And so CAPS, you're right, Chris. That CAPS had went by the wayside for a while, but that's when it started to come back.
Right.
And I'll tell you this, in my opinion, I didn't particularly like CAPS as a patrolman because I really didn't understand it.
Yeah, right.
But when I became a district commander, I started to recognize how valuable that one little piece was in terms of bringing the communities together with the police department.
No doubt. And for our listeners, CAPS is kind of our acronym for community policing, community outreach policing, community meetings with the community for, and the goal initially. So when I was going through the academy, it was CAPS all day long, right? And so we were, as patrolmen, you were really kind of tied to your beat, and in theory, and actually in practical applications, a lot of times, it is important. I think I learned that as a homicide detective, what's going to make you successful at the job or not. And I think this, in my opinion, at least, you're going to have a better view of this than me. That ability to communicate with people in the community you work in is going to make the difference, is whether you solve a lot of these murders or not.
Absolutely. So CAPS, the acronym actually stands for Chicago Alternative Policing Strategy. That's where the acronym comes from. But to your point, cops very rarely witness a crime taking place. That doesn't happen much. So you have to rely on the community to give you the information to solve these things, especially when it comes to homicide. And if you don't have that relationship in the community, they're not going to do it. And let's face it, especially in the Black community, they already are a little, they have that angst with the police department. Yeah. But I'll tell you this, so I grew up in Cabrini Green, housing project. And we knew which cops were friendly towards us and which ones would bang you upside the head, Yeah. And so I learned at a very young age how important that relationship was. Yeah. Because I know Mike, when we were in Area 4, if you developed that relationship, people would tell you, hey, JoJo did that, but you ain't hear it from me. Right, because they still got to live in that neighborhood. Yeah, right. But as long as they can point us in the right direction, usually we can find enough evidence to bring a case forward, Yeah. So, that communication within the community is very important in terms of how the police operate.
Yeah, it is. And I think as you push that out, when I talk to young policemen and people that want to be detectives, I got taught by really good people that when you stop people on the street, you talk to people on the street, give everybody respect, talk to them in that way, and if they don't give it back, then whatever. But you get to know people, and some of these like well-known hardcore players on the West Side, I knew their grandmothers because
right.
I just learned from guys like Crony and Farrell and these guys, Mark Vale, and that was the thing. It wasn't like, let's go kicking the doors in.
Right.
Let's get to know people. It's not that shit you didn't have to do that. You're a policeman. Sometimes you got to go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of let them dictate how you're going to approach it, But like you said, Mike, most people, and I found this from the time I was a commander till superintendent, to be honest, people in communities, challenge communities, all they want the police to do is treat them fairly and with respect. That's all they want. And to me, that's not a huge ask. That's what we should be doing.
Yeah, right.
So when you approach it like that, you're more apt to get the information that you're looking for.
Right. And I think, kind of an ancillary benefit there. And I think about this, particularly Rick Coyle going down being a school resource officer in this small community. He's getting to know the kids in the school, and they did this great video before this incident happened, him and this other school resource officer. It's kind of painful, but also beautiful to watch now about how these kids really felt safe around them. The administration really felt safe that they were there. They liked them. They were friendly to them. And I think what happens then with that is the ancillary benefit to that is you also start to know when you have that kind of communication, like who the problem people are, who they are. And so a kid gets in trouble doing something, you got a pretty good feel, this is a one-off for this kid, I believe, you know what I mean? Or, all right, this is this doesn't surprise me. This kid's a problem, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that what I'm getting at there, you know that about the community you're working in, you can avoid a lot of that fear that is in a lot of the communities, like the African-American community, especially, but the Spanish community too, any community that like we're just not grabbing people up off the street. Right?
Exactly. Because, I tell you, when I became a cop in '88, it was common practice, especially during the summer. We had a wagon in every sector of the district. So we had 3 wagons working. So it was very common on Friday evenings, you go out there, you see guys out there drinking and just raising sand, raising hell. They get locked up. But you knew where they were for the rest of the weekend, so that kept crime down. But of course, these days you can't operate like that. And there's a reason why. Because, we have to remember you can't police in 2026 like you did in 1980. Yeah. It just doesn't work, And we actually, the police department in general, we actually should be a part of the community. Because to your point, when you're a beat cop and you learn the folks on your beat and you get to know them, they start to trust you. They really do. And I remember when I became superintendent, I'd say probably the top 5 Black activists in the city at the time that just hated CPD. I knew some of them already, but when I became superintendent, I invited them up to the office. Tell me what's your beef? Why are you so anti-police? And we just talked through it. And before I knew it, we became partners in keeping the city safe and keeping Black communities safe. Because all they wanted was to be heard. And I just found out in my career in 31 years, a lot of times people, when they are explaining some of their problems to the police, they have a sense that maybe you can't get done what I'm asking you to do, but they appreciate you listening to them. Yeah. And then the things that you can do, you do it. Yeah. And that develops that relationship to where they can see something happening that you have no idea what it is, and they'll call you up and say, hey, Detective Hammond, I saw blah, blah, blah. And just so you know, this dude did it. And there you go. You develop that relationship.
Yeah, that concept of CAPS. I actually worked for one of the neighborhood organizations that was instrumental in driving that in the 90s into becoming a practice. But I think one of the goals was at that point, like the 80s, 70s, coming into the 80s, into the 90s, you largely had 2 separate entities, right? You had the police department, and in the perception of the communities, you had the community. And very rarely did those 2 work in conjunction with each other. And for people that, and as you probably saw as a patrolman, as you go through a neighborhood, you might know where some of the hot spots are, but you don't know where the extra business,
right.
If you live in the middle of a street, you got 5 gangbangers that are hanging out there every time threatening everybody that walks by, but you have no way of voicing that to anybody.
Right.
Call 911, call 911, call 911, but that's not really solving the problem.
That's right.
That communication becomes huge. Did it work? Does it work? I think it is a very important first step towards building a stronger relationship between the community and the Chicago Police Department, which in 2026, I mean, the challenges we're facing over the last 20 years in terms of race relations, relationships between the police and the community, the relationships between communities, right? If we don't have that kind of communication, I think we're in trouble. And we're starting to see the bad end of that.
Exactly. Exactly. Because you know what? I hate to say this, but it's just the reality of where we are in 2026. When I was growing up, you knew everybody within a 2-block radius of your house. You really did. You knew everybody. You go down a street today, sometimes next door neighbors don't even know each other's name because people keep to themselves now. Yeah. But what that does is it makes it more difficult for that block to stay safe. Because what I used to tell people all the time, squeaky wheel gets the oil. Yeah. And people that develop those relationships with different cops, if you keep complaining about the same thing to that cop, that cop is going to do something about it because they're going to get tired. Two things. They get tired of hearing about it, and they get tired of having to go back to the same place. Yeah. They really do. So that communication, you're right, it's critical to keeping the city safe.
It brings up just an interesting thought. As you start on patrol, your perspective, or let's say the kind of issues and the scope of those issues that you're dealing with in the community, one from patrolman, incident to incident, day to day, week to week, to sergeant to lieutenant, overseeing more. But when you hit superintendent, you're in the middle of
the fight, man.
You're in the middle of all of the issues.
You are, and that's funny. You mentioned that. I was having a conversation with my daughter last night, and she just moved back to Chicago from Atlanta, and she was just asking me my perspective of being a superintendent. And this is what I told her. Broadly, you have 3 different buckets, 3 different constituencies. You got the citizens of the city, you have the rank and file police officers, and then you have the politicians of the city. And those 3 entities, really, all 3 of them are never going to align, ever. That just don't happen. If you can get 2 out of the 3 to be on the same page, you're doing pretty good. But typically, everybody is on a different page, man, and that's what makes it difficult to manage. But I was able to, because my personality, I'm a people person, and I like to do a good job, and I listen to people. And like I explained to my daughter, listening is a skill. It's a skill, and you have to know how to listen, but you also know how to talk to people so that they receive the message you're trying to give them. Because if you're talking at them, they're not going to listen to you. They're going to tune you out. But if you're talking to them, then they'll start to listen to you. And that's, for me as superintendent, that was critical, because Tony Riccio was my first deputy. And I had 3 first deputies over my administration, but he was the last one. And he gave me such a great compliment one time when he was doing an interview with the media. And he said, "This dude, I've never seen somebody who can calm a crowd down, a community down as quickly as he can." And that was a great compliment. And just over the years, patrolman, detective division, on through the ranks, I just really started to understand, especially when I was in Area 4 Detective Division. Our commander, Coble, we had a bad homicide on the west side one time, and he sent me to the community meeting, and these people were pissed, and really with the police. But the police had nothing to do with the incident. But sometimes they think the police can do more than what they actually can. But that particular community meeting really taught me how to interact and bring the temperature down, because you can escalate any situation you go to if you want to. Right. But that's not optimal. That's not ideal, because you don't know how that's going to turn out. So as superintendent, I had to learn how to communicate with all 3 buckets, and see, I'm the type of guy, I'm pretty straightforward. Straight, no chaser, and I'm not going to lie to you about it. I'm going to be as transparent as I can, and that's what people want, and I think people like that.
Agreed. I mean, and you really I got to mea culpa a little bit here, because you just taught me something. I think, like anybody else, I was a homicide detective all those years, and that's all that I really ever wanted to be. And once I felt so lucky to make it, and then I got there at 4, I loved it. I'm like, I never took a promotion exam, which I would catch hell from some of the people I work with, like Farrell and Coble's one of those guys because I understood their point, like, and it was a genuine compliment to me that, like, hey, you need to take this test because we need good bosses. You can't just, but it's my dream to be a homicide detective. That's what I did. But I'm sure glad that people like you did take the test and move up, and those guys, because it certainly made my job easier. But what I'm getting at here is I have on this show and often talked about defensive of the police department, saying, we cannot solve all of society's ills, right? We can't cure mental illness. We can't cure poverty. We can't do those things, which are at the root of most of the problems we see, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is about race to some degree, but it's mostly about poverty. It's mostly about addiction, mental health things. We can't do much about that. But you just made a point that is the answer to my beefing about that a little bit, and I respect it a great deal. And that is what you can do as a policeman. I hope I did this and didn't realize I was doing it, but you can't just listen and be that, because you are that front person.
You are first face of government. Yep.
Yeah. And although we can't solve those problems, we can at least hear them out and say, gotcha, hear you, but, here's what I can do.
Right. That's it. This is what I can do.
I guess I'd never even considered that. But yeah. The police department is the first face of government.
They are. And
really, I mean, you don't see your alderman on the street.
Nope.
Really, you don't see your alderman anywhere. As a matter of fact, and I start thinking about that
bucket.
My
alderman won't even answer his freaking phone.
And that's it.
Yeah. I have to question what we're paying them for.
I know, right? But
a rubber stamp for the mayor. Yeah. Sorry, I got my 2 cents in.
I'd like to take a moment from the program to have a real talk about safety and security. Toward that end, I would like to introduce you to my friends over at Blue Knight Security Solutions, your ultimate partner in protection. Blue Knight Security Solutions isn't just your average check your ID at the door security company. They're a team of elite detectives, investigators, and law enforcement professionals with unparalleled expertise. Whether you need their real-world investigative prowess or securing your home, business, synagogue, church, or event, Blue Knight has you covered. From risk assessment to tailored security plans, they'll ensure your safety. Blue Knight Security Solutions provides street-smart operators who can handle any situation. Contact Blue Knight Security Solutions today at 773-706-4920 or visit BlueKnightSecuritySolutions.com.
But you're right. All the societal ills are dumped at the feet of the police department. Yeah. I don't care where you go in the country. That's how it is. And unfortunately, police, they can't solve all those issues. They cannot. Yeah. But what they can do is listen to you, maybe point you in a direction where you can get help. Because I tell you, mental health is real. Mental health challenges is real.
It seems like it's, just this is from, I guess it's not from the outside looking in because I live in the city, but it seems to me like it's getting worse.
I tell you this, and I remember having a conversation with Rahm Emanuel at the time. And one of the things I learned as a patrolman is that people in need of mental health treatment, they aren't going to go far from their neighborhood to find it.
Right.
They just aren't. So I think one of the things, and he and I talked about it a lot, and I think he looked at it from a financial point of view, but also from a person point of view. And those people in need of mental health, when you close down clinics that's in their communities, they aren't going to get on the bus, and they just aren't going to do it.
Right.
So to your point, we do have to do a better job as a society of getting treatment for those folks that need it and make it as convenient for them as they can, because they just aren't going to travel very far to seek it on their own. Now, if they have a family member or somebody who wants to take them, they'll do it. Yeah. But they ain't going out there on their own. That's just how it is.
Yeah. That's a really great point. And I think same is true with addiction help and that, right? So, well, first of all, I want to say, working for you in Area 4, you said this earlier, and you were one of the many good bosses that I've heard say this. Really, the sergeants make a unit, right?
They do,
they're the back. The police, the guys in blue, men and women in blue are the police department. But sergeants are the ones that are really keeping them out of trouble, keeping them safe, keeping the community where getting the help it needs. And you as a sergeant in Area 4 were so great to work for, and I'm not blowing smoke at you, but just because you trusted us to do our job, you expected us to do our job, but you trusted us to do it, and if we needed something, you were there. But mostly it was like, all right, go do your job, and we did it, and that's good leadership in my opinion.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Mike. And I tell you this, one of the things I loved about Mayor Emanuel, he hired me to be the superintendent of the police department, and he didn't interfere. He let me be the police superintendent, and I remember him telling me one day, as you know, he was a congressman. He was in President Clinton's administration. He was President Obama's chief of staff, and then he was the mayor of this city for 8 years. So he had a lot of political experience. And I remember him making a comment to me one day, because, we would have cabinet meetings, for the city. And he said, hey, I just believe in hiring the best experts I can find for a particular job and let them do it. And so that's how I was as a police supervisor, man. You all, I was fortunate enough, in Area 4 to have a great group of detectives who didn't need motivation to do their jobs, because they were passionate about what they were doing and they were good at it. And I when I would travel across the country and across the globe, as a matter of fact, I would tell other police chiefs, whether it was in this country or, London, Paris, it didn't matter. Wherever I was, I would always tell them, in my opinion, the Chicago Police Department had some of the best detectives in this world. And I'm still thoroughly convinced, if you can police in the city of Chicago, you can go anywhere and be the police. Now that's good and bad.
Yeah, right.
It's bad because it just, we have so many challenges in a city like this, but that's the nature of the business.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, that's took a lot of pride in being in Area 4. Our kind of esprit de corps was great there. Mm-hmm. Everybody, he didn't really want to go on vacation because you're afraid you might miss something.
It's funny you say that. I was having a conversation with a group maybe about a month ago, and I was telling them, they asked me, about my career, and I told them what's funny about cops. They're so passionate that, to your point, they don't even want to go on vacation or days off. If something high profile happened, you hated when your days off rolled around because you wanted to help catch whoever committed that egregious crime. Yeah. But that's just how it was. And that's what I tell people. The majority of cops want to do the right thing and do a good job. Do we have bad apples? Of course we do. We do. I don't think there is a way, and there'll be a time where we completely root out bad apples. That's just, every organization, entity you have on this planet have their bad apples, but as a superintendent, it was my job to try to root them out and get rid of them, because one thing about it, good cops hated bad cops because it made us all look bad. So we do have them, but I am confident, and I can say this with extreme confidence, that the majority of police officers in this city want to do the right thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm glad you feel that way. It doesn't surprise me, but one of the things that I talk about a lot with that too is, I built these relationships on the West Side. We were talking about this before we started, and I knew some of the worst killers probably in this country, and drug dealers. I knew their grandmothers and that because of these guys that taught me how to do the job. I'd built relationships with them, and one of the things about those relationships is very tenuous. This is what always concerned me about those few coppers that would go bad, that would take money or do other things, because that relationship turns on a dime if they feel like you can be bought, or they feel like you're corrupt, or you feel any of those things. You might feel like, well, now I'm getting better information. But the truth is, they don't respect you anymore.
Right.
And then that's lost, and it makes everything more. It makes it more dangerous for everybody else, one. And two, the information you're getting, you don't know is bullshit or not.
That's right.
And because you've that line of respect of, you're on your side, I'm on my side, right? You do your thing. If I catch you, I catch you. You catch me. Okay. But that gets blurred very easily. You start playing the fuck around game.
Yeah.
Right? But anyway, the one thing I do want to get to, because it kind of tickles me, it probably don't tickle you, but it does tickle me. Like, you not only never had designed to be superintendent, you didn't even apply for the job, right?
No, I didn't. And I tell you, Mike, so after Laquan McDonald incident, and they had put out the application to become superintendent. I was at the time, I was a deputy chief. I think I was the executive or XO of patrol. And I did have aspirations at the time to apply for superintendent, just not then, because I was finishing up my master's degree at Northwestern. I was planning a wedding, and I knew at some point I was going to have a kidney transplant. So those three things were top of mind at the time. So when the call came out for potential candidates, I was like, I talked to my fiance at the time. I was like, I'm not going to apply this time. I'll wait till the next time around. And lo and behold, what happens is the names that were given to Rahm Emanuel, he rejected them. So now they have to start the search again.
Sure, glad he did.
They rejected those names, and his deputy mayor for public safety, Janie Roundtree, reached out to me one night, and by this time I was the chief of patrol, and she called me on like a Friday evening, and she said, "Hey, Chief, can I ask you a question?" I'm like, "Sure." She said, "Why didn't you apply for superintendent?" And I give her basically the reasons that I gave you guys. And she said, "Well, let me ask you a question. Would you be interested in superintendent?" I said, "Well, I think I could do it, but those other things are still there." She said, "Well, would you be willing to have a conversation with the mayor?" I said, "Yeah, I'll talk to him, but
kind of tough to say no to that."
Right. Yeah. So I go to City Hall the next day, which was a Saturday. They slipped me in through the, underground, so nobody would see me going up there. And we have a candid conversation. And he said to me, "Look, we need a superintendent. We need a superintendent from this city." And so I asked him point blank, because I didn't know him. And of course I had, had small talk with him in different situations, but I didn't know him. And I said, "Let me ask you a question. Why are you zooming in on me?" And he said, "You really want to know?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "Because everywhere that I go, whether it's with the community, the rank and file, business people, politicians, your name keeps coming up." He said, "So I'm not going to lie to you. We looked into you, and I think, you'd make a good superintendent." So I said, "Well, you know what? Let me think about it, and I'll let you know." So we did this dance of death for about a week or so, where he could tell I wasn't budging. I wasn't coming closer to saying yes. So I go down there the next Saturday, and he was like, "So what do you think?" I said, "Well, Mayor, listen, I haven't talked to my family about it, but I did talk to my fiance, and she ain't really feeling that." I said, "I can't do it if she's opposed to it." I said, so he was like,
which is freaking smart.
Yep. Right. But so he said, "Well, listen, are you afraid to do it?" I said, "No, man, I've been a cop in this city 20-something years. You'd be hard pressed to find something that I'm afraid of." I said, "No, I'm telling you why." So then he goes, "Well, listen, as your mayor, you don't understand. Your city needs you right now. They need you." He said, "As your mayor, I'm asking you to do it." And I'm like, "What the fuck, man?" See, now you're not playing fair. I said, "Because, Mayor,
But the city was in bad shape at that point.
It was. And I said, how can I say no to the mayor?" I said, "But I tell you what," I said, if let me talk to my fiance and see if I can get on board, because it'd be tough without that." So he looked at me and he said, "Listen, I don't talk to wives, I don't talk to girlfriends, I don't talk to fiancés." He said, "But fuck it, what's her phone number?" So I said, "Okay, you can call." I said, "But give me a minute to call her first, so she'll know you're calling her." Right. And I left his office. This was on a Saturday, so I headed home. So he said, "Okay, give me about 15 minutes. I'm going to call you." He said, so what are you saying?" I said, "I'm giving you a tentative yes. And he said, "Okay, I'm going to call you in 15 minutes, and then we can close the deal." I said, "Okay." 15 minutes go by, no call. 30 minutes, no call. 45 minutes. Now I'm like, what the fuck is going on? About an hour went past, and he still doesn't call. About an hour and 15 minutes later, he calls and he goes, "Okay, you pussy, you can come out of the fucking basement." She's on board. So they have been talking all that time, just about stuff, I guess. I never even asked her, what did they talk about? But that's how I became superintendent, and I agreed to take the position. And I have to be honest, Rahm Emanuel, I couldn't have asked for a better boss because that man never tried to interfere. And people don't know this. As much grief as he took from the police department at one point, he never, whenever I would go to him with a problem that I needed him to take care of for the police department, he never said no. All he would say is, "Okay, give me a day or two to figure this out and I'll get back to you." And he always came through. And if he had stayed mayor for that third term, things would have been a lot different. Yeah. Because we had stuff that we had planned to do for the CPD, for the betterment of the rank and file, just never happened because he left.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I think it's the culture of the police department to beef about the mayor. You know what I mean?
It is.
Because we're always negotiating contracts, and at the kind of base rung of the police department, it always is like us versus the mayor. But in retrospect, he looks like a damn genius compared to what we have seen since, right?
Yep,
And he certainly was the last leader that we had, in my opinion. So I'm sorry, Chris. I know you wanted to get.
I was just. It occurs to me after the interview with Melissa Staples, I had forgotten about the process by which you became superintendent. So, become superintendent, and then you yourself had a phone call or a conversation with Melissa Staples to move her into chief of detectives against her. She didn't apply for that position, did she?
Mm-mm. She did. She went kicking and screaming. But here was the thing. So I was a sergeant in Area 4 with Melissa Staples, and I remember none of us wanted to have to deal with the sex crime stuff. We just didn't. And she stepped up to the plate and she took it. So what I learned about Staples in Area 4, that she was very thorough, very meticulous, and the detective division needed someone to go through it and find out how we can make life better for the detectives.
Right.
And I knew she was the person for that because he's real anal with that kind of stuff.
I think we were having the conversation, Mike, about part of leadership being having to make hard decisions to move people out of comfortable positions that they're in where they're doing very well, knowing that they could be more service and do better for, let's say, the department and thus the city in a different position. But you're moving them out of someplace they might be very happy.
Yeah, you're moving out of their comfort zone. Because I'm going to tell you this, Chris. So during my career, every time I got moved, like when I came to Area 4, I went there kicking and screaming because I was having a blast in the 5th District as a gang tactical sergeant.
Right.
I was having a blast. And Commander Coble was our watch commander in the 5th District, and he just saw the way I worked. And he called me and he said, "Hey, how do you feel about coming to Area 4 Detective Division?" I said, "Well, I'm cool over here." He said, "Well, I need your help." And that's how I got moved. So every position I got moved to, I was comfortable where I was, but it was for the betterment of the department, and it made me better. And all of those movements helped prepare me for becoming superintendent.
Yeah. So from on that same kind of line of thought, then, as a superintendent, that had to come up on a fairly regular basis where you had somebody who was good in a good position doing a really good job. So it's got to be a real kind of balance. And I say, well, if I move them up into this spot, their abilities are going to be even more amplified.
Right.
But how am I going to backfill that spot properly? I mean, that come up a lot.
Yeah. So I tell you this, Mike. So as a district commander in a busy district, one of the things that I learned, my timeline was always about 6 months ahead of real time. So I constantly be thinking, if I do this, then what do I do to replace that person? So as superintendent, it was the same thing. So I was very comfortable in that area by the time I became superintendent because I was used to doing it.
Moving 5-6 steps
ahead. You have to be. So to your point, when you have people that are doing a great job where they are, you're always thinking to yourself, they could be even greater here. They don't see it because they're comfortable where they are. But then when you start thinking about moving them, before I moved them, I was also thinking about how I was going to replace them.
Yeah, right.
There has to be, I mean, I watch a lot of TV, right? You guys live the reality, but there has to be some pretty hardcore internal politics within the Chicago Police Department.
Oh, yeah.
And as you move up the chain of command into superintendent, you're not immune from the politics. Well, you're in charge of the politics at that point.
You're in charge of it.
So there, I have to think, and it was something that Mike said to me in a side conversation earlier this week, that there are situations where someone is in a position of power because of the politics of the department, where they might not be the right person for the job and can in fact do tremendous damage, not just to the police department, but to the community.
That's exactly right.
Which is the opposite of what their role is. So do you see it then as not an obligation, but a priority to move someone into that position, maybe as like a deputy chief or something that can handle the community and handle the responsibilities in terms of leadership to mitigate that damage?
Mm-hmm. So for me, one thing I'll give Rahm Emanuel credit for also, because to your point, you do have political pressures on people calling you saying, hey, I think so-and-so would be good for this position. And you sitting there thinking, this dude is an asshole, man. There's no way I'm going to put him there. But they would really try to pressure you. But Rahm Emanuel was good at keeping them off of me. I'll never forget. I had an alderman call me one night because he had multiple shootings in his district, and he was pissed off because now he's getting it from the community, which I understand. It was late on a Friday night, and he calls me and he goes, Superintendent, this commander over here, I've been to 3 different shooting scenes and I haven't seen him at one of them, blah, 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 blah. I want him moved. I want him moved by Monday. And I'm on the phone. I'm saying, I'm not doing that. Well, why not? I said, because that's a good commander. I said, yeah, you might not see him at that crime scene because he might be at another one. But I can assure you of this, he's out there, but he can't pick up the phone every 5 minutes and, keep you abreast of what's going on. Well, I want him gone. I said, well, I'm not doing that, Alderman. I appreciate your passion.
Not because of my own bias, but I would venture a guess that he was a better commander of that police district than that alderman was of that ward.
Probably. But so then the alderman goes, you know what? Well, I'm calling the mayor, and we'll see about this. I said, call him. I said, matter of fact, we can put him on a 3-way right now. No, I'm going to fucking call him, and we'll see. I said, okay. Never heard another peep out of that. Never, So I give Rahm Emanuel all the respect in the world because he respected my ability to make good choices. Yeah. And like I used to tell him, sometimes I would tell him, hey, I'm going to promote so-and-so to wherever. And he'd be like, is he or she a good? I said, well, Mayor, sometimes you don't know until they get there how good they're actually going to be. But from what I know of them, they're solid people, and we'll give them a shot. And if we have to, change something, then we will. Yeah. But I believe in giving people opportunity. I remember, was this in 2017 or 2018? Maybe 2018. I was walking in the Gay Pride Parade, and this blue shirt walked up to me, and he had tears in his eyes. And I'm like, what's going on? He said, I just want to say thank you. I said, for what? And he goes, because no other major city has 2 gay individuals as chiefs other than Chicago. He said, you just don't find that. He said, believe me, I know because I tracked this across the country. And I looked at him and I said, well, let me be honest with you. I put them in those positions because they're good people and I thought they could do the job. See, your sexual preference, your color, your skin, that stuff didn't matter to me. All that mattered to me was if I thought you could get that job done and make my life easier as the superintendent. Now, did everybody I promote turn out the way that I hope? No. You're never going to get 100. You're never going to be 4 for 4,
Right. I think to his statement, though, you're probably one of the few leaders that would not hold it against them in putting them in that position.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
You know?
Yeah, or the opposite, put them in a position because of
something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You put them in there for the right reason, right? And
Yep.
I think that's a huge statement. And you also did not put them there because I guarantee that there's some men that are bad or women that are bad leaders that would refrain from putting somebody in that position, not based on the merits of their capabilities, but because of their sexual preference, especially in 2026.
Yeah.
You know, seems to be par for the course these days.
And I can tell you, I got a call the other day from someone that said they were working with somebody in another Chicago agency. And I'm not going to say because I don't want to put this person on blast, but they were like, this lieutenant is still pissed off with you because you never promoted him to commander. And I'm like, I don't even know who this guy is. You know, because you have to remember that when I was superintendent, we had 13,500 sworn members. I'm not going to know every one of them. That's just an impossibility. So what lieutenants didn't understand, if I don't personally know you, then there has to be someone that brings you to my attention or something that you did to bring you to my attention. And that don't always happen. So I know I probably did overlook some really good potential leaders, but that's just how it goes.
It's just a pure numbers game
at
some point.
It is.
I mean, you can't, but it's a really interesting point to hear from you, that Mayor Emanuel, you felt like he had your back and the importance of that, because that is true. That's why we say the importance of sergeants, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that is true at every level, right? Like, I mean, there are, I know as a detective, when I worked for people I knew had my back, all you got to do is go out and do your job.
That's it. And you have that, because I was able to sleep really well because I knew Emanuel had my back at every turn, man.
As opposed to being a scapegoat for the politicians.
Yeah, that happens too, man. And some politicians, unfortunately, they'll use you to flex their muscles, you know. Yeah. And but that's part of it, But I always tried to do the right thing, And sometimes in the moment you might not know what the right thing is, then you sit on it for a minute until it becomes clear to you. But I always tried to do the right thing, And if CPD, and this is, I think, one of the things the black activists came to find out about me, if we're wrong, we're wrong. And then we try to correct the mistake and get the person coaching or mentoring, whatever it has to be, more training, and then we move on. But the worst mistake you can make, I think, as a superintendent is trying to pretend like we didn't make a mistake. Because we do. We're human. We're not robots. So sometimes we're going to make mistakes. And even when patrolmen would make mistakes, I would have politicians calling for that person's head. And I'm like, that's an honest mistake. Yeah. I put them in a penalty box for a minute and then get them training and put them back out there. But I'm not going to terminate this person just because you want me. You're pissed off at them. No, it doesn't work.
And that's good. And that's part of why I think you were considered, a policeman's boss. And because people felt that way. People felt like they're going to get a fair shake.
Get a fair shake, yeah.
And you're going to step in it. I mean, if you're out there working and you're doing things, you are going to step in it.
Sometimes you are.
And a lot of times it's not your own making, but that's one of the things I learned in the many, many hours I spent in court testifying is the fastest way to get a defense attorney off your back in a bad situation is say, yeah, I screwed that up. That's on me.
That's it.
You know what I mean?
That's
then they're like, well, shit.
Yeah, because here's the thing, Mike. Once a person is transparent, they say, I fucked it up and I'm sorry. There's nowhere else to go with that. That's just something you just got to let it go.
Right. They turn to the jury and say, see, he says he's incompetent, right? Well, okay.
I made a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. So, no, I respect that, and I appreciate that you were there. I think we're getting close on the time here, but what am I missing? What have I missed?
Listen, I think one of the things I want people to know is that for me personally, I always tried to do the right thing. You might not have agreed with me, But it wasn't because I was just being a prick, I always tried to do what was right. And I have the utmost respect for the men and women of this police department. But I also found out a lot of community members and activists, here was the thing, Mike, what I found out being superintendent. All the buckets that I named, well, I might take the politicians out of that because sometimes they could be on a totally different agenda. But with the community and the police department, and as well as these activists, what I discovered was that we all wanted the same thing. We just took different roads to get there. Yeah. And that's okay, as long as we end up at that intersection where we are accomplishing the same thing. And without that harmony and that networking, you're never going to get the city where we want it. So it's so critically important that the community and the police department work together, because that's how you get there.
Agreed. And this is my opinion, so I don't want to put it on you, but it's really interesting to hear you place it in those buckets like that, and it makes a lot of sense. But it does occur to me that this is a real problem in the city, in our society right now. Those buckets, police department, politicians, community. If the police department, the community, the police department, politicians, always going to be this kind of give and take, and sometimes struggle, sometimes disagree. But man, if the politicians and their own community they're serving are not in sync, that's a problem.
It's a problem,
right?
There's a problem,
and that seems to be, to me, from my own perspective right now. And so I encourage the community to take a look at that. And you feel like you're not in sync, that is something you got to control.
You do.
Yeah. I would say that by and large, the majority of politicians that I see in the city of Chicago see their primary responsibility in the city as getting reelected, not servicing their community. And if you, as a citizen of this great city of Chicago, feel your alderman is more concerned about getting reelected than he is representing you in City Hall, in conversations with the Chicago Police Department. I mean, I think that's a huge part of the problem we have right now.
Yeah, because to your point, Chris, you bring up something that happened with me while I was superintendent. I was trying to get the repeat gun offender bill passed in Springfield. And I'll never forget having a conversation. I mean, I'm not going to put him on blast, but with a black state senator. And he told me, he said, Superintendent, you are absolutely on point with everything that you're saying about this bill. He said, you're all right. He said, but my main thing, I got to get reelected. And if they think I'm going too far, then, people won't vote for me. And I'm telling him, your constituents want law and order in their community. You're doing them a disservice by not helping me get this bill passed. But he was like, I can't vote for it because I got to get reelected. That was his main concern. And I said to him, you know what? If I was sitting in your seat, if I know I'm doing the right thing by my community, then whether I get reelected or not, I'm voting for this. Right. So that's
what you'd hope people
would think. That broke my heart when he said that.
Because at the other end of that, right? At the other end of that, there's a life.
Yeah. And I told him, I said, the very people you took an oath to protect, you're victimizing them. Yeah. Just like when we keep letting these guys out of prison. This last incident that we had, there's no reason that should have happened. Mm-hmm. You look at the judicial triangle. You have police, state's attorney, and your judges. The police and the state's attorney can do everything right, but if that judge lets that guy out, then we get what we get. Yeah. And the problem is the police are always held accountable. The state's attorney is always held accountable. The only entity that's not held accountable are the judges. And I get in trouble with some of them. But don't get me wrong, we have a lot of good judges. Yeah. But we have some that simply shouldn't be there.
No, right. I agree. I think this last situation is a perfect example. I mean, if you're not going to keep someone locked up after sticking a gun in, the last time, a gun in a woman's face and stealing her car, I don't know what I'm not quite sure what more he has to do to stay locked up.
No, especially in that wasn't a one-off.
Right.
And that's the thing, I think, working on the West Side most of my career, one of the things I learned was, and what motivated us was, with the shootings and the murders and that, there really aren't that many. There's a lot of kids that end up in gangs and stuff because of all the societal issues and
Right.
that. But it turns out there's not that many. And now I've been retired 9 years. Things may have changed, but typically there weren't that many shooters, killers out there.
Nope.
So if you're motivated, you put a case together, you get them off the street, it would quiet the neighborhood down for a while until and so I think that perspective is lost at the judicial level, and at that we think, oh, we're going to change societal ills by not incarcerating so many people. Like, okay, fine. I thought this, like the Safety Act or whatever, I thought that was designed or it was sold to keep nonviolent offenders from getting stuck in the county jail. I think most people are down with that. Policemen are down with that.
Right,
Like,
that's okay.
Guy
That's
gets
fine.
locked up with a couple of bags of weed and he's
Right.
stuck in a county jail for 3 years because he can't, like, I get it.
Right.
But people who are committing violent acts.
Violent offenders should be kept in jail until their day in court. You know, and we can't keep spinning on this hamster wheel because you can't fix decades of injustice to the black community by letting out bad guys. Now, some people need to be fucking in jail, and that's just how that is. Some people need to be in prison, you know, and like I always say, you know, with the Safety Act, I'm all for nonviolent offenders if you release them prior to their court. I'm okay with that. But violent people, they need to sit there. You need to give them a timeout because, to your point, Mike, there aren't that many of them. That's why shooters and killers are so valuable to the gangs. That's why they spend all their money bailing these guys out because you don't have a lot of them that's willing to do that, not as a lifestyle, you know. So we just have to do better, you know.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you're right. Across the board.
Yep, we have
right?
to do better.
So, what do you got?
Mike Hammond for alderman.
Forget about that. Forget about that. Mama Hammond raised me better than that. But we do need good people for sure.
We do.
Boss, man, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Pleasure's all mine.
You know, I considered as friends in your area for, and I always have. One of the great litmus tests to me of a good leader is to see how little they change as a human at every step up. And of course, we see the opposite quite often.
Right.
But you were certainly a guy that we didn't have much interaction when you were superintendent. You were too damn busy. I was busy. But, and then I retired, but you always seemed like the same man that you were when.
You know what, Mike? It's funny you say that. So I went to my college reunion last summer, and there was a judge. I knew him in college, but I hadn't seen him since college. But saw him down here at the college reunion, and he said at Eastern Illinois, and he said to me, he said, "You know what, Eddie? I have a couple police officers that I know I'm real close to." And he said, some of them that worked with you when you were a patrolman. And they said you didn't change a bit from the time you wore a blue shirt until you sat in that superintendent's chair. That's one of the best compliments I could have ever gotten.
I think it is one of the best compliments.
True
you know
story.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Did you ever see the old TV show, comedy skit, Ali G?
Mm-mm.
No, Ali G had this, he would interview people and interview very famous people, and he would always ask some questions that, if I get in trouble, do you think you could get me out of trouble still?
I know, right?
Chris's motivation to be my co-host is always to figure out how am I going to get myself out of
trouble.
The next bit of trouble I find myself
Okay.
in.
Right.
All right.
He found a real friend in Melissa, I'll tell you that. So, all right, boss, I appreciate it.
Okay,
I
not
really
a problem.
do.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. All right. That's all we got. Thank you so much. It was a great honor. Thank you to Superintendent Eddie Johnson for coming in. And you guys take care. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other.
Be careful.
Appreciate it.